Welcome back. In this video, we're going to add the permission for the external storage. So we want to read the external storage once we click on this button, this gallery button, and then we want to select an item or an image from the gallery. And in order to do that, we of course need to first of all implement all of the permission stuff that you have seen in the demo. By the way, in order to follow the exact same structure that I'm using here, it's important that you are using API version 31. Okay, so that you're not using an older one, because otherwise the activity result launcher will not work. So before you try to implement this yourself, which I would highly recommend, let's quickly look at the settings that I have in my build Gradle. So the dependencies that I'm using are the following: KTX 1.6, app component 1.31, then the material design 1.41, constraint layout 2.1.1, the JUnit 1.1.3, and the Espresso core version 3.4.0. Okay, so if you want to have the exact same code working for you, that's going to be important. And then the compile SDK version should be 31. The target SDK version should also be the 31, and the minimum SDK version should be 21. All right, so I highly recommend that you try to build it this way. And now at this point, I would highly recommend that you try to build it yourself. So here, of course, you need to add the permission that you want to use. And this will be the last hint that I'm going to give you, or the last code that I want to give you before you try it yourself. And the permission that we're going to need is the read external storage permission. So at this point, I would recommend that you try to implement the code that we have built in our demo, in the permissions demo. Okay, so try that, pause the video. And then once you're done, you can of course check out how I did it, and otherwise you can skip that as well. So good luck with that, and I hope you try it now. Okay, so in the main activity, the first thing that I'm going to add is going to be to show this little alert dialog. Okay, so I'm going to just call it show rationale dialog, as we have done in the demo. So if you're wondering what all of this stuff is, where this is coming from, well, it just comes from the demo. Okay, so I added the code there already. Why should I have to write everything from scratch if I already had built it in the past? So that's something you can really do when you build your projects. Really try to reuse as much code from other projects where it makes sense. So here it really makes sense because this is just a general functionality that I want to use, and that is just to display an alert dialog with a builder, and then set a message that I can pass, as well as the title that I can pass to this method. Okay, so now we have this private function, and now let's go ahead and go over to the top of our activity here, where we need to set up our activity result launcher. So I'm going to call this one request permission, and it will be of type activity result launcher. So activity result launcher, this one here. And I need to define what type it will be of, and I'm going to say it's going to be strings, because an array of strings actually, because I want to be able to then later on ask for multiple permissions and request for multiple permissions. So I'm going to set it up this way straight away, and you can see that here this import has been added. And this only works if you have a certain build version here, because I tried to run it on 29, on the compile version 29, and with my older dependencies, and it just didn't work. So really make sure that you have the versions that I'm using, otherwise this activity result launcher wouldn't exist. So this is the latest approach to that. Before that, there was a different approach, which is also why I'm updating this video to the latest approach of how you can request for permissions. Okay, so here we need to call the register for activity result method, and we need to pass the activity result contracts. So activity result contracts with multiple permissions that we are requesting. Okay, so here opening bracket and like so, and then we get the permissions here. So here we get the permissions, which means we can use a lambda here. I'm going to call this one permissions like so, and we can now get the permissions entries. So permissions, did I call it permission? It's permissions, it's a plural. Permissions entries dot for each. So here I'm using a for each loop to go through all of the individual permissions that were asked for. And accordingly, we need to get the permission name. I'm going to get it like so. Permission name will be the it.key. So here, this mutable map, this gray part here, you see it's a mutable map, mutable entry. And the key is the name of the permission, and the value is whether the permission was granted or not. So here I'm going to just create a variable called isGranted, and it will be the value of this mutable map, mutable entry. Okay, now we can just check if isGranted. Then we can toast a message. We can say permission granted, you can now read the storage files. Okay, so I'm just going to use this toast here. Very simple. And then in the else block of this isGranted, I will know that I don't have the permission. And because I'm going to use multiple permissions in the future, I can just go ahead and directly ask for what kind of permission name was given, because in my case, I know that I'm asking for the permission .read external storage. And here, well, if you use the manifest, make sure that you're using the right import, as the IDE automatically gives you the Java import. That's not the one that I need. I need to use the Android import. So here, use this one, manifest Android. And then you see that it will be added all the way at the top here, Android.manifest. Okay, so now this has the permissions, and the one that I'm going to use is read external storage, like so. Okay, and this now, well, in this case, I'm just going to display a toast again for now, just saying, oops, you just denied the permission. So if the permission isn't granted, then it will be not granted. And we're checking if it's not granted for that particular permission, because as I said, we can then later on add more permission requests here as well. So this it value, by the way, is going to be of type Boolean. You can see that here. So the permission name will be of type string, and the it value here will be of type Boolean. Okay, so that's why I can just check if it's granted. Okay, because it will be either true or false. All right. So that is how we set up our request permission variable that we can now use inside of our onCreate method. And now in order to make it work, we of course need to set up the second image button. So in the activity main XML, we have those two buttons, right? So we have multiple buttons, but then we have this gallery button, which I called IB gallery, right? So we need to use find view by ID here in order to set up this button. So I'm just going to set it up here. I'm going to call this one image button gallery, which will be of type image button, like so. And I'm going to find the view by its ID, r.id, and it was IB gallery. So now I can use this IB gallery in order to set the onClick listener and now do the request for permission right here, because that's where we need to do it, right? So I could, of course, add all of the request storage permission in here, but then the onCreate method would be super large. And we can avoid that by creating an extra method that will take care just of the request storage permission functionality. So let's create a new method here. Private fun request storage permission, like so. And then let's call this inside of our onClick listener here. So once we click on the gallery, we want to request the storage permission. Currently, there's of course nothing happening here, but of course we need to check if we should show request permission rationale, as we have seen in the demo. Activity compat is what I'm going to use here. So activity compat dot should show request permission rationale. I think this is the longest name for a method that I have used in Android app development. Not built by myself, so not written by myself, but it's really descriptive. So it really says what it's about. And here you need to pass in the activity as well as the permission string that you want to use. And the permission is something that we can get directly from the manifest, right? So the permission string. which just means the name of the permission. So read external storage, because if you look at it, the external storage internal name is this variable name here, which is this string here, and which is, by the way, the same string as we have here. So that's basically the permission that we are checking. So should we show the request permission rationale? And if so, well, then let's just do it. And how can we do it? Well, let me first of all clean this up a little bit so this can be going to the next line like so. So if we need to show it, then show it. And the rationale dialog will be here. KidsDrawing App will be the title, and the message will be KidsDrawing App needs to access your external storage. Okay, of course we could be more descriptive, saying otherwise you cannot assign a background image. So that's something you could write here for the user to know why he should or she should give us access to this feature, because otherwise the user might think, hey, what does he want to do with my files? He doesn't have to have access, or this app shouldn't have access to my files, which is totally understandable. So if we should not show request permission rationale, so in the else block, then we can request for permission. And we're going to launch an array of permissions. And in this case, the array will just be, for now, having one permission entry. So read external storage. We're going to add more later on. So for example, if you want to start writing to the external storage, once we want to store the images, that's where we would then add it. Okay, so here you can add a to-do, add writing external storage permission. Okay, so we just know, okay, well, that's why we will need to add it later on. But accordingly, we would have to add it in the Android manifest as well. We're going to see that later on. Okay, so at this point, we should be done. Let's test it. I don't need this import image because I just misspelled something there. Let's try it out and see if we're going to request for permission once we click on our gallery button / image button. By the way, the next part that I'm going to show you, so the next couple of minutes, where I'm showing you how I make changes to my Gradle files as well as to my Android manifest, they will not be necessary if you are using the Arctic Fox version that I was recommending. So the Arctic Fox version 2020.3. And if that's the case, then you will not have to make those changes. So what I would recommend is that you just run the application and test it on your emulator or device. And if it works, you can just ignore the next 2 minutes of video and then just move on with the course. So what I did is I used my old project to build up on it, and accordingly, of course, the versions were different. So if you want to use the version that I'm using here, I'm using the Kotlin version 1.530, and here in that case, you don't need to set up JCenter. You can use the Maven Central here, as well as I'm using the Gradle version 7.02. If you do that, you need to sync your file. And then once you did that and synced it, you might need to migrate. But once you do that, in the Android manifest, you need to add the Android exported setting. So here, Android exported must be set to true in order for you to be able to run it with this particular version. If you, however, started building this application using directly Android API 31, you should not run into these problems because these settings should have been set up in the same way. The same goes for the version. If they're close enough, then you shouldn't have to make changes. But other than that, that's basically going to be the code that we need to use. So let's go ahead and actually test our application. So once we click on the button, you can now see that if we don't allow, it will say, oops, you just denied. Even though we didn't deny it actively, but by not clicking on it, we are, so to speak, denying or not giving access, or at least we are not giving access. That's the whole point here, right? So now if we allow it, you can see permission granted. Now you can read the storage files. And if I click it once again, you see I just get this detail here, but I don't, well, do any other features or activities. And the thing is, what we want to do instead of displaying the toast here, what we want to do is we want to actually then run the code that we want to execute, which will open a new activity for result, which will then take an image from the gallery, which we can select and then put it into our application. So that's what we're going to set up in the next few videos. But for now, that is it. So see you in the next video.